because, there is the outline and teaching plan of Romans that we will be following somewhat next Wednesday as we begin. But I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction into the book. There are commentaries and there are commentaries, okay? And you have to be careful. But I brought the commentary that I have here that I mentioned in the outline that I've given you. It's Dr. Frederick Lewis Godet, and as you can read there, he writes a very excellent commentary. He was born in 1812 and he died in 1900. And he was a Swiss Protestant theologian who studied and pastored and taught in Germany. And the thing about, Frederick Lewis Godet is that when you read his commentary on the book of Romans, he's an individual that, as he has written this, he has had access to some of the oldest Greek manuscripts. So the commentary that if you would want to order one, you're not going to go to the bookstore and find it. You'll have to order it, okay? Commentary on Romans by Frederick Lewis Godet. But he had access to the oldest, manuscripts, and he's one that he inspires the person that's reading to dig out the truth. See, that's what God's Word is supposed to do. It's supposed to challenge us, okay? And he's one that when he writes in this particular commentary, he asks you as the reader, the studier, to dig out the truth and find out for yourself, what, is being said here. Now, so, that's something that, you can do for your library, because I'm still old style. I want something I can hold in my hand and read, and you may want something that you can do on the internet or on the computer, I don't know. But, this epistle, this letter, is really the chief part of the New Testament. And it's the very purest of the gospel, and it's worthy not only that every Christian should know it, really word for word and by heart, but to occupy his or herself with it every day as a daily bread, for your soul, okay? It can never be read too much. And the more it's dealt with, the more precious it becomes as you continue to read it over and over and over again. It's just like, chili soup. You make it one day and you read it the next 2 days and it just gets better and better. And so when you read the book of Romans, it's just like that. It's, one of the most, remarkable, letters of a most remarkable man, the Apostle Paul, okay? Because when you read the book of Romans and you study this book, you find that it is in his heart, okay? It contains, the theology that is practical, for which he lived and he died for, all right? It gives very, very clear exposition, of the doctrines of sin and grace, and it's the best possible solution, of the universal dominion of sin and death in what we see in the second Adam, okay? The book of Romans is a very profound book that's in existence today, and it's a very valued part of the Scriptures. It's been appropriately called and termed the cathedral of the Christian faith, okay? Because its profound theology and the impressiveness and the style that, and with it was written, is one of the best of Paul's letters, okay? Martin Luther, Everybody knows about Martin Luther. He said the Epistle of Romans is the chief book of the New Testament. It deserves not only to be known word for word by every Christian, but to be the subject of its meditation day by day. And the more time one spends in it, the more precious it becomes, and the better it appears. And if you're not, big into church history, the Reformation that Martin Luther started was because of the book of Romans. I'll just share a little bit in that regard, because during this period of time, the Bible was written in Latin, and the Catholic Church was the only individuals, for the most part, that could read it. And everyday people, such as ourselves, if you couldn't read Latin, which most people couldn't, you had your own natural language, whether it be German or French, or Swiss or whatever. So what the Roman Catholic Church did at that time was that, okay, if you want your sins forgiven, then, you need to give the preacher an extra $100. Okay? And, he'll pray over you and your sins will be forgiven. Because that's what it says. That's what it says here. I'm the priest and I can read it and you can't. That's what it says. And so people were doing that. And Martin Luther said there's something wrong with this picture. So, he learned how to read Latin and studied that. And then he translated, the New Testament into German. And he came to Romans chapter 3 where it says, the just will live by faith. And if I confess with my mouth that Jesus is Lord, I will be forgiven of my sins. He said, that's it. They've been lying to us all along. Now I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's pretty much the case. And so he defied the Roman Catholic Church with his 95 Theses and said, we're not going to do this anymore. And pretty soon the Bible got, printed out, in the German language, and everybody could read that, so it became pretty much, well known. But when Paul wrote this epistle to the church in Rome, the congregation was already in existence and had been for just a few years, because Paul writes that he had desired to visit them many years. That's in Romans chapter 15, verse 23. So to him, this church was strong enough to help him carry out his other missionary activities that he was, called to do. And, he said that, they're not, in this church, they were not all brand new Christians, and they're not, being treated, as such, but, they were knowledgeable, they were filled, with the Spirit, and they had been, pretty much settled in. So the church had a large Jewish segment of people, but it also had a lot of Gentile converts as well in this church. There were free slaves as well as regular slaves. And, from the Roman Catholic view, they say that Peter kind of founded this, but, from most church historians, the Christians in Rome, that after the day of Pentecost in Jerusalem, they made their way to Rome and they started the church there. But, it could have been just, several families that became knowledgeable of the Lord, became a follower of Christ, and they just met in their house and began, to grow. And so, anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a background there. And the book of Acts and the book of Corinthians, looking at those, the book of Romans indicates that it was written from Corinth. Paul was in Corinth at the time when he wrote this, and he sent that, to Rome, and at the same time, he was en route to Spain when, he did these things. And it was about 57 AD when he wrote this in Corinth. And then we look at some of the chronological order of Paul's epistles. There is 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, which came next. There's Galatians, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Romans, Colossians, Ephesians, Philippians, Philemon, 1 Timothy, Titus, and 2 Timothy in that order. So Romans, though, is placed first among Paul's letters in the New Testament. Not only because that it's one of his longest works, but because it gives us and it furnishes us a lot of basic theological framework for the rest of his writings. So the book of Romans has a lot of important aspects of it. Now the theme of the book of Romans, it centers on the gospel of Christ, okay? Because when Paul wrote this, he was very, very concerned that his readers understood, okay, how a sinner may receive as righteous by God, how he would be righteous by God, and how a justified sinner would live on a daily basis and glorify God. So the theme, and you can, mark this down, the theme of the book of the Romans is righteousness by faith. Okay? Righteousness by faith. And, it's been described as kind of an exposition of the Old Testament, in view of the gospel of Christ. And we'll see some of the patterns that go along, with that. So, we're going to learn some terminology, like what does the word redeemed mean? What does the word justified mean? What does the word righteous mean? Because you'll see those words, you'll read those words over and over again. And it's important that you know the true meaning of those, because otherwise you're gonna miss it, okay? So it's important that, when we go through that and look at those words, that you keep those things, in mind. So that kind of gives a little bit, of an introduction. I didn't want to bore you with a lot of numbers and dates and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea, and so that's why I also printed out a handout. Were you able to get enough, Jennifer?
I did. I got some extras.
Okay, super. So you have some, literature there, and then there's the outline and teaching plan that we'll be following. And I don't know how long it'll take us to get through this, but we'll go as far as we can. But when we do an exposition, how many know what an exposition of the scriptures are? Okay, that's where you take chapter 1, verse 2, verse 3, and verse 4, and you dig everything that you can out of those verses. That's a lot of work.
Yes.
It is. And then you move on to verse 6, 7, 8, and 9, and you dig everything you can out of those. When I was in Bible college, I had, homiletics, 2 classes, 1 and 2, and that basically, tells you how to prepare, a message. Because if you don't have things, prepared right, then people aren't going to be able to follow you. They're not going to be able to understand. And the whole point is that if you're going to teach or preach for 30 minutes, the average person is only going to remember 3 minutes. So, you want to get it presented enough, and if you write things down, then you'll retain 6 minutes worth, okay? I still have things in my old Bibles that I've written down that I remember 40-some years ago. And I can tell you all about it because I wrote it down. But, expository, an exposition of the scriptures, that's a little bit harder. Because then you're looking at, 3 or 4 or 5 scriptures, and you're looking at anything to do with that. The language, the customs, and the laws, what is being said in relationship to the context of the rest of the scriptures, the theme of the book. You're really digging into that. And so that's what we're going to be doing, when it comes to, the book of Romans, because, it's very, very important that when we take a book of the Bible, at least from my standpoint, as a teacher anyway, that, I want you to be able to glean and grasp and get as much out of it as you can, so that when you go home and through the week, you say, you know what, I'm going to go over that passage that, Brother Dave went over, and he said these things, and I have this, outline of what he was talking about. And you know what? I went over that 2 or 3 more times, and I got some more stuff, out of that. And then pretty soon your faith is increased, your life changes even more than what it has been. And then when we come back and we move on to chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and so forth, it does the same thing, I could never sit still to where, if there was someone that was a good teacher and they presented things, in a way, I never wanted to leave. I was always the last one in class to leave, I just want, give me some more, And so, hopefully, we can, have you, learning some things as we go along. So it's almost 8 o'clock, so does anybody have anything to add or share to what we've already talked about next week? Romans chapter 1, verse 1. We've got the introduction all out. We've got a teaching plan that we're going to be going by, and I'll hand out, an outline of each week what we're going to be talking about, so that, you can write some notes down as we move along, maybe put some questions on it, whatever, okay? But it's a great book. You'll really enjoy it, so. Anybody? All right.
I'd like to thank you, Dave, for all the effort that you put into this, man, and these outlines and everything. I was just telling Tiffany here earlier that, I've got a big stack of these papers that I've got through each of these weeks.
Oh, yeah, well, good for you.
And I love the way that you go about explaining things, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm gonna use them as a cheat sheet in the future.
That's what they're for.
For me to reference.
That's what they're for.
And steal some of your thoughts, for that matter.
Yeah.
But I really just wanted to thank you and tell you that
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I figured if it was a way that I have been able to learn, because I'm just a dummy, that if I can do it and learn it this way and it's appetizing for me, then it should be appetizing to a lot of people, So that's kind of the way that, we go through here.